I will be your moon. You will be my sky. And I promise I will follow you until the end of the line. And I will be your flower if you will be the bee. And I promise I will always give you the sweetest parts of me. 'Cause you're the tip to my top, the key to my lock. You're my breakfast in the morning. You're my up to my down and the king of my crown. And you're everything I want. You got that sweet, sweet, sweet honey. Sugar. And I want it sweet, sweet, sweet honey. You got that sweet, sweet, sweet honey. Sugar. And I want it sweet, sweet, sweet honey. So give it to me.
Oh, I never want to cut off Scarlett Park. She's just too darn charming. The show is Wicked. That's WYCD. It stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake, and let's call this a 2 for Tuesday. Not that it's a sustainable streaming schedule currently, but went a little light yesterday due to the sunburn situation, so I feel bad. Plus, I love reading y'all the news, and we have a whole lot of it breaking. Well, we got one piece of breaking news, and it's just generally been a busy news afternoon, so I'd love to do an update. 2 shows in one day. I can't stress that it's not the Wicked guarantee. But hey, if we get it going, this becomes a financially solvent operation. Maybe. Let's jump into it. Per the stream title, Alan Weisselberg headed off to jail. A tiny little bit of justice, except that it's jail, not prison. It's a 5-month sentence. Spoiler. Let's look at one of my many news crushes, Katie Tur, discussing it and asking some questions that gives me hope that this trend of letting powerful people go with, if only if the Justice Department is forced to give them a sentence, the lightest possible sentence. The patience for this nonsense seems to be wearing thin. Here is Katie Tur
News out of New York City, where just moments ago, former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg was sentenced to 5 months in jail for his role in the company's sweeping 15-year tax fraud
she
scheme.
stresses.
NBC's Tom Winter is outside of the courthouse with the details. Tom, was this what we expected?
It exactly was, Katie. And Alan Weisselberg, the former CFO of the Trump Organization, obviously the former president's personal company, the one that has rocketed him to his fame and to his wealth, is now in the handcuffs and in the custody of the New York City Department of Corrections. He'll be headed to Rikers Island, about a 34-minute drive, 8.1 miles from here today, to serve this 5-month sentence, which, when you take into account what is expected to be time off for good behavior, should mean that he gets out in sometime in April. He was taken into custody at 2:36 today after the judge gave him his well wishes, said that he would honor his promise to that 5-month jail sentence. However, the judge says, having heard the evidence in the case, he found it, quote, offensive that Weisselberg's wife received a payment so that she could ultimately receive a Social Security benefit. He said, look, at a time when so many Americans are working so hard to be able to eventually get those benefits one day, he felt that it was motivated by greed, just like the entire case, he says, was motivated by greed. And had he heard that evidence prior to his promise of only 5 months of a jail sentence, he would have gone higher than that. But ultimately, the judge says he made a promise, and so he kept with the 5 months as a jail sentence. Prior to that, prosecutors saying to the court, look,
okay. He's a motor mouth. So I think if that promise had been made to somebody of average wealth, of average power, I would be glad to hear the judge keeping it. A rich person should not get that same consideration. Why? Because the Justice Department, in my opinion, and this is not a lawyer's opinion, this is just a guy that has to live in America. The judicial system in the United States needs to demonstrate that we do not have royalty. And I'll tell you that judge would have been well within their rights to say, you withheld information from me. This was ultimately a case about fraud, and you withheld more fraud. I'm not honoring our agreement because you did not honor our agreement. I'm increasing your sentence, yada, yada, yada. That said, very glad to hear them stressing that it was a 5-month sentence after this guy spent years and years and years playing around with taxes that should have gone to funding America, to building roads and schools, and keeping America running. Spent years, made a career out of it. In fact, 5 months is what he gets. Think of how many people are currently spending years in prison because of the condition this guy and guys like him helped to create. Despicable. Let's let him wrap it up.
Satisfied all the conditions of his plea agreement. He did testify truthfully at trial. He did say that he was this high managerial agent, basically somebody in charge of the Trump Organization, helped provide key evidence that effectively put the Trump Organization not behind bars, because you can't jail a corporation, of course, but led to the guilty verdict against the former president's company. So this effectively ends this chapter of the case. We have no pending cases remaining on the criminal side, Katie. Of course, the civil suit by New York's Attorney General against the Trump Corporation, the former president and his family members, including his kids, that case moves on, but that's separate from all of this. At the end of the day, Alan Weisselberg, who still, through his attorney, professes loyalty to the former president and thanked the president's family, the former president's family, for their support through all of this, he is now on his way to jail.
Does that mean no more criminal cases could be brought or might be brought against anybody else within the Trump Organization in the future?
Well, Katie, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg said on MSNBC over the past couple of weeks in several appearances that the case remains ongoing. He has said so publicly at press conferences. We have not seen any sort of public indication that that case has been ongoing. What might that mean? Witnesses being called to the grand jury. We haven't heard about any additional subpoenas for documents. We haven't heard about any additional investigative steps. Now, some of that happens in secret, and sometimes we're not always the first to know, of course, as you well know, but we haven't heard any of that since. So the Manhattan DA's office is, look, this case remains ongoing. We're not seeing any signs of that at this point, but of course, that could always change, Katie.
All right, so I'm really sick of hearing this consolation prize that a civil suit could still happen. I'm just sick to death of hearing the Department of Justice in America dodging responsibility and then having it this sort of Band-Aid put over the wound by the media when they rush to tell you, but a civil suit is coming. I want to see these people who rob us. I don't care that they rob us with a pen instead of a knife. I want to see these people who rob us given lengthy prison sentences to deter the behavior. I have a very colorful background, part of which includes some criminal justice classes at a community college. And one thing did stick with me, which is the purpose of punishing a criminal. That's part of the training. If you're on your way to be a cop, you gotta ask questions like that. If you're on your way to be a lawyer, you have to consider, what is the purpose of this, other than to get a good shot for the 6 p.m. news. The purpose of punishing a criminal is, number one, yes, to try to reform that person's behavior, to provide negative societal consequence or negative consequence within a society so that this person thinks twice before doing a crime again. Maybe 5 months is enough for Weisselberg. I doubt it, but maybe, if that's all you're considering. It is also to provide a sense of justice for the victims, in which case that is all of us, you and me. Not satisfactory for me. How about for you? Perhaps most importantly, the purpose of punishing one criminal is to deter others who may be considering doing that crime. I cannot fathom that 5-month jail sentence. I realize he's going to Rikers Island, but it's under a year. I'm not going to call it prison. That 5-month sentence, not even factoring in good behavior. That 5-month sentence isn't going to deter anybody. That I can't see that as anything other than if you're a rich person, being viewed as a green light. Don't worry, America's not changing. You can go on robbing folks. If you get caught after a prosecution, after an investigation and trial that lasts longer than the sentence, you'll be in and out of prison before, I don't know, the next season of House of the Dragon comes out. That's insane. And that is a shame. As always, there's a lot you can do. Number one is I often tell you to write your representative. Let me tell you this. Make it a habit to write your representative once a week. Just try to build that habit. You will always, always have something on your mind worth talking about. And if something particularly irks you, such as Alan Weisselberg getting a weak sauce sentence for years of fraud, make it their problem. Make it something that they have to be annoyed about all day. Just tell them, I want you to talk about this publicly. I want you, on behalf of me and a bunch of people like me that didn't bother to write you, I want you to say you're not pleased with it. I want you to be an advocate for me wherever your voice is heard. Contacts in the description. If you don't know how this show works, I rely heavily on the description of these videos. I provide usually a brief guide, or at the very least, a series of links related to what we're talking about. If you want to know how to contact your representative, if you've never done that before, link in the description. There's a link to all of this, including the source videos, in the description. Take advantage of it. I try to make it as easy as possible for you to get things done. On this, the sentence has been given. We can't increase that now. But you can make sure it doesn't happen again. Make a big splash, make a lot of noise. We did talk on the first stream today about another way you can ensure that the powerful are held accountable. In this case, Donald Trump. They talked about the Trump organization being found guilty, and yet, miraculously, the guy running it was not. Donald Trump spent, I think, last weekend, inciting more violence, trying to get his supporters to overthrow the government again. We ignore it now. We don't even, it's not even headlines when he says this stuff anymore. That's how used to it America has become, and there's just no consequences. If you're sick of that, do note we have had 2 attorney generals in states that the fake electors plot happened in. We had 2 attorney generals file state charges. Normally, what happens is that, let's see if I can pull that up. There we are. Normally what happens is the state AGs defer to the federal government. Well, last week, Dana Nessel, maybe it was, Friday? Yeah. So last Friday, Dana Nessel announced she's sick of waiting. She reopened the state case. Georgia, with Fani Willis, has been on it since 2021. And they just got out of, what is it? They just, I'm less familiar with the Georgia grand jury system. They have 2 for bringing a case. They just got out of their first grand jury, which seems to have approved the case. Keep up the pressure. If you are from one of the states listed up here, I didn't copy the whole description from the last video, but there is a detailed set of links in the last video. There is a link if you're from one of those states without a green check mark. There is a link in that video. It's the long stream that's now in the VOD section. For your attorney general, their contact page. Use it. Tell them you want state charges because the January 6th committee named Trump directly as the orchestrator and prime benefactor of the false electors plot. They tried to undo your vote. And in 2022, a lot of the people, including the now lieutenant governor of Georgia, were allowed to be on the ballot again, even though they attempted a coup. even though they tried to undo your vote, the least democratic thing that can happen in a democracy. Heartbreaking. Don't stand for it. Don't put up with it. Tell your state's attorney general you want a state case opened into the fake electors plot. If you are from Georgia, if you are from Michigan, write your attorney general. There's contact information in that video. And when I re-upload this, it just occurred to me, I'll put the contact information in there again. Tell them good job. Because I promise you, progressives do not contact politicians. It's just not in the culture. But I promise you, our dark opposites do. And Dana Nessel and Fawny Willis are getting hammered right now in their inbox. They would love to hear that they've got your support, if they do have your support. Worth considering. Well, let's see how quickly I can import a video and have it make sense in here. Because, there we are. Because D.L. Hughley is back. A couple of viewers. Ooh, I'm going to have to pause this right away. Get ready for a quick draw McGraw.
United States and Ukrainian officials tell CNN that Russian artillery fire is down as much as 75%.
All right. So, D.L. Hughley's back on the channel. We had a clip of his on a little bit ago, and a bunch of viewers told me about what he's been up to since then, and I've been watching him. I do want to stress, though, before I play this video, he does. Oof, this really is interesting. He does not only talk about race issues. He talks about all kinds of issues. I almost used him as a jumping off point for talking about the House vote. But then, of course, as with everything, tech problems got in the way. But here he is talking about Dana White and recent development that occurred in Dana White's life, and also how the media covers it. It was a little eye-opening for me. Hopefully it'll play. It ain't playing. Hey, there we go. And going right over that copyrighted music. All right, here's D.L. Hughley on the Dana White situation.
Is directly dependent on how that story is told.
Oh, it's killing me. Let's try it one more time. There
that was Donnell Jones. You know what's up. So the way a story is perceived by the public is directly dependent on how that story is told. Case in point, the middle of last week, Dana White, who is the president of the UFC, there was a video of him circulating where he and his wife had a physical altercation. Now, she struck him. He struck her a lot of times. My question isn't about who was at fault. My question is about why it took the media so long to cover such an event. I remember seeing the video, I think early Saturday night or early Sunday morning, and no one, even in the sports world, covering it until that Wednesday. Can you imagine if that event had played out and it had been Chris Brown or Antonio Brown or Bobby Brown? The media they wouldn't have been able to stop talking about it. But the fact that the first time we heard about it on the sport, the first time I heard about it, Stephen A. Smith talked about it, and he prefaced his whole story.
Stephen A. Smith breaks my heart whenever he talks about non-directly sports-related issues, every single time, because he's such a charming man, and he has some of the worst takes I've ever heard on TV.
The lead up to the story with extolling the virtues of Dana White. Have you ever seen somebody who had just had a physical altercation on television, on video, get their credits and their humanitarian virtues read out before you got to the gist of the story? It never happens that way. Because generally, and I heard, I think the young woman who co-hosts with Stephen A. Smith, I'm not going to judge anybody on their worst day. But the media often does that. I remember on ESPN, a young man who had a fight, I forgot what sport it was. They went back at it when he was 16 years old and told us, how violent he was. So the media is complicit in shaping stories based on their biases or perceptions.
Okay, so I'm somewhat torn on this one. On the one hand, being totally clinical about it, my initial thought is I would like to hear the media waiting and getting all the facts and assuming the best and taking into account that his wife hit him first and yada, yada, yada. On the other hand, he is right. If it weren't Dana White, if it were Charles Barkley, I suspect this would be covered very different. I suspect it would have been front page. Instead, I heard about it first from D.L. Hughley. Now, I've gone out of my way not to look it up, even though I'm very curious, because that's the point I wanted to stick with. I heard about it first from a guy talking about, let's call it Dana White privilege. That's unfortunate. I had someone earlier mention, though, I talked about how the internet is, by and large, good for progressives. It makes more people progressive because there is more access to information. I suspect in the bad old days before I could see a clip like that from Mr. Hughley, I would never have heard about this. I offer that only as an optimistic take, but let's let the man finish. Because as usual, he's concise and he's killing it.
I don't know who started that fight. I do know this, that if that had been anybody else doing that we would have heard about it ad nauseum. And there would have been people interjecting ad nauseum. We're not talking about some athlete. We're talking about the president of a major sports franchise. Can you imagine Adam Silver or Roger Goodell doing that? Because that is how the media shapes narratives. We know about Ray Rice when he does something. We didn't know at the same time Ray Rice was accused of domestic violence. There was a Alabama Superior Court justice who beat his wife in front of the police, and he still sits on the bench. We know about athletes' drug use, but we don't know. We hear that ad nauseum. We don't hear about the owner of the Colts who has a car trunk full of drugs. We know about Deshaun Watson's massages, but Robert Kraft, who owns the Patriots, was caught in a sex trafficking ring. So that is how the media is complicit. We know about the Boston Celtics coach having an affair, but we don't see a man who's the president of the UFC having a physical altercation with his wife. And let me just say this. And do you ever see the media giving a story, extolling the virtues of somebody before they tell a story about somebody having a physical altercation with their spouse? Because the media has a vested interest on how we see things, how we perceive things, how we feel about things. Because these guys make a mistake. These guys are criminals. These guys are deviants.
There it is.
It shapes, even the term black on black crime comes from the media. It comes from the Chicago Defender. Somebody said in the story, the media took it and ran with it, and now it is a part of American lexicon. That is how they shape narratives. Why do you think it is that very rich men want to own media outlets? Why do you think that is? So they can tell a story and shape a narrative, and they tell you how you should see you and you should see events. So not the old adage, to the victor goes the spoil, is not as apt as whoever has the camera tells you what to believe. That's a little note from the GED section. We got the Jazz Report coming up in 15 minutes.
So D.L. Hughley, once again, just crushing it. Absolutely crushing it. I do not know how I missed the last 20 years of this guy. I would have loved to have been there for the whole journey, from him going from a relatively, I don't know, B-list comedian to, now he was A-list. Debate in the comments, or correct me in the comments, certainly. But to where he is now, which is a guy that is so plugged in to, in my opinion, exactly where we go wrong as a society. Fascinating. Love that we got a strong voice out there, telling it as it is, frankly. I do, but I do want to clarify. I think a lot of people hear that and think that what progressives want is for, Dana White to have a worse day. And that isn't necessarily so. It's that we want equal treatment for everybody. It's frustrating. Take, for example, the case with Weisselberg, where I specifically said a rich man should get a harsher crime. Well, because he's in the gang of rich. Because this guy has demonstrated he had more to work with. He had longer to do his crimes before there was any consequences. I want to see these people treated no different than the kid caught with a bag of cocaine. You shouldn't be walking around with a bag of cocaine. But you shouldn't be treated like an animal because you work. You should be treated like what you are, which is a guy with a drug problem. If you're Alan Weisselberg, you shouldn't be treated like a prince who's down on his luck. You should be treated like a guy that defrauded the United States government and thereby the American people for years and years and years. If you're Dana White, as I said, I don't know the specifics of his situation. But I shouldn't have to hear about Dana White's altercation only because its lack of coverage was compared to the coverage of all the other people's altercations that I did hear about immediately by multiple sources. The double standard is not acceptable. And earlier, as I was saying, I talked about how the internet has been good for progressives. Plain and simply, it's because of moments like these. It makes it easier, if you're willing to look, to see into other slices of life. It also makes it possible to utterly seal yourself off. But most people, from other slices of life, but most people don't seem to make that decision. There's a conversation to be had about algorithms. There's a conversation to be had about internet literacy, certainly. But by and large, the accessibility of information is going to make double standards like this harder to maintain. That is good. I'm going to keep watching D.L. Hughley. I'm going to make an effort to make sure the next time I feature a clip of his on the show, it's not talking about race relations, because we've had 2 in a row, and this guy talks about all kinds of things. I don't want to give a skewed view of his content. But I'll tell you, I haven't heard him miss yet. Watched about 10 D.L. Hughley clips. Been right on point for everyone. Well, let's leave the borders of the U.S. for a moment, but follow a U.S. package overseas. Got a good friend by the name of Bradley, who's heading over to Ukraine with a message for the Ruskies, which is go the home. Here's CNN.
United States and Ukrainian officials tell CNN that Russian artillery fire is down as much as 75% from the wartime high. Officials say the cuts may be a sign the prolonged and brutal battle has had a significant effect on Russia's weapons stockpile, and the Russian forces may be regrouping and trying to pinpoint where Ukraine is going to launch its next major offensive. Warren Lieberman joins us live from the Pentagon this morning. I think that the big question means, and then what? It's interesting timing also, Warren, that this comes as Russia had called for that ceasefire.
Yeah, take this with a grain of salt, because I am absolutely not a military expert. But being something of a Russia studier, yeah, that ceasefire was to regroup. Plain and simple. There was nothing merciful about it. And I would suspect that they're, based on the progress of the war, I would suspect they are literally rearming.
Absolutely. A ceasefire the U.S. believes was not intentional, or rather not a real desire for a stoppage to the fight. It was Russian President Vladimir Putin trying to appeal to the Christian faithful and trying to show that it was Ukraine violating the ceasefire. Aside from that, this is an indication with this dramatic decline in artillery fire that something has...
Stop him there. He did his overall credit where it's due. This is live TV. It's, I'm sure, a nerve-wracking experience. Hard to get exactly right. Ukraine never agreed to a ceasefire. You can't violate an agreement that you didn't enter into. So just to be clear, his phrasing there, even though he was coming down, against Russia, or not even really that, but he was making an assessment of Russia, yada, yada, yada. Ukraine did not agree to a ceasefire.
Clearly changed within the way Russia is fighting this war. The question is what? From the wartime high of 20,000 artillery rounds per day down to about 5,000 rounds per day now. Russian military doctrine, the way Russia fights its wars, calls for a barrage of artillery fire, and then essentially ground troops go in and clean up or mop up what's left. So why this significant difference? And that's what the U.S. is trying to figure out, according to U.S. officials. They have talked for a long time about a shortage in Russian precision weapons, less so about the conventional ammo, just like artillery fire. Maybe, the U.S. officials tell us, this is an indication that Russia is beginning to run low on its vast stores of artillery after 10 months of fighting and with no end in sight. Ukrainian officials say, look, we've also hit a number of Russian weapons depots, so this may be making a dent, or, Poppy, they may be regrouping for future Russian operations.
Yeah, that's a big concern, too. Oren, thank you very much for the reporting from the Pentagon. U.S. officials tell CNN there has been a, quote, substantive change.
So what she's about to go into is what I was real excited for. The fighting in Ukraine has been brutal, and in my opinion, unnecessarily so. I would again bear in mind I'm not commenting as a military expert by any means, but I would rather see this be a quick war with our Ukrainian allies as heavily armed as we can get away with arming them. And I do not like that we were so hesitant to send them serious military vehicles. They will do a very concise job of breaking down what we're about to send them. But just understand that the biggest obstacle on the ground, artillery aside, has been tanks. It has been tanks. Even though Russia's strategy of sending a tank out without foot troops escorting it was insane and has allowed, frankly, Ukrainians on foot to rack up a ton of tank kills. Slava Ukraini. It's not, in my opinion, it's not sufficient to just let them fight a whole war like that. But here comes the good news.
And the type of weapons being sent to Ukraine as the nation closes in on 1 year since Russia's invasion. And this comes days after the U.S. announced its largest military aid package for Ukraine to date, with new systems that one official says give Ukraine much more capability. Let's turn to CNN anchor and chief national security correspondent Jim Sciutto. Jim, good morning. You know all about this. You were there on the ground when the invasion happened almost a year ago now. Can you explain what is different about what they're getting now in terms of weaponry?
For sure. I think it's always important to look at this, not just one weapon system, but the collection of weapon systems over time and what that tells us about the battle on the ground. So let's look at these latest parts of this package. Bradley fighting vehicles, I'm going to focus on that in a moment. More capable surface-to-air missile systems and surface-to-surface missile systems, artillery systems that are more...
Now, hold on a second. I had missed that. The surface-to-air missiles. I was careful to say the hardest part about the ground war has been the aside from the artillery, the tanks. The hardest part of the war has been Russia's air superiority. They have an air force which, compared to ours, is like I don't know, a toddler having a temper tantrum that's extra kicky. Whereas we are Mike effing Tyson in his prime. That said, Ukraine doesn't really have much ability to do anything about it other than use the somewhat outdated surface-to-air fighting systems we've given them. I'm going to look into these updated missiles that are being sent. That's great to hear, though. That is fantastic to hear. May the cancer rush through Putin, but assuming that doesn't happen with a quickness, this is a good second option.
Accurate and have greater ranges. That's the collection of things we've seen recently. Let's look at Bradley fighting vehicles in particular, because these are going now. It's an armored personnel carrier, carries troops into battle, but it also crucially has a tow missile. Yeah. This is an anti-tank missile attached to it. You've heard the reluctance throughout this war of the U.S. and its partners to send tanks. This is not a tank, but it does have the ability to attack and destroy Russian tanks, and that's important. It's particularly important on the battlefield in the East. I'm told by U.S. officials that this is in response to what Ukrainians are asking for, and the U.S. and its partners trying to be responsive to what Ukrainians are asking for now.
Okay, so if you're looking at that and you're thinking, man, really seems like a tank though, right? The thing that makes it not a tank is the amount of armor on it, frankly. The Bradley is a problematic vehicle. There's a whole movie. Man, I might just do a stream dedicated to the movie about the Bradley. It is, first of all, hilarious. Second of all, a vehicle that wants to be all kinds of things and isn't any of them all that well. But one thing it has on it is that missile, a way to deal with tanks. Now, I don't know that I would want to be in a Bradley taking on a tank. One-on-one, that's not much of a fight. Don't miss. And if you hit, hope to the bejesus that the tank you're hitting happens to be one of those tanks with the fake armor plating on it. Earlier in the war, we saw some of the tanks Russia was using. Their system is so corrupt in Russia that a lot of folks who are supposed to maintain their military equipment instead just take the money that they've been given to do that and don't maintain their military equipment. They have stockpiles and stockpiles of weapons. So a lot of these generals were of the thinking that this will never be used. I never have to worry about it. Well, now they're being used and they have to worry about it. I'm quite sure some oligarchs have gotten tossed out of windows for this. But that aside, Bradley versus a tank is not, don't think this is like an insta win. That's not a easy fight. But America's got a whole lot of them. So 10 Bradleys versus a tank, now we're talking. And certainly Ukraine has shown, if anybody's got the heart and let's calls it like we sees it, the balls to make a fleet of Bradleys beat a squad of tanks, it's the Ukrainians.
Can you speak to, Jim, what these changes reveal about the battlefield in eastern Ukraine?
It's a couple things. So let's look at that battlefield. Well, one thing that's different about out there, it's flatter ground, more wide open ground than we saw, for instance, around, say, Kyiv in the early stages of the war. And that makes you think World War II tank battles, really, Poppy. And you got wide open areas here where you're having an artillery battle, and you can have these Bradley fighting vehicles and tanks really go into open conflict there. The other piece of this that I'm told, Poppy, is this, and that is that the U.S. is concerned that Russia is going to attempt to regroup, launch more aggressive offensives here, and they want to get the Ukrainians the equipment they need now to push back against that.
I think that's what Bob Gates and Condi Rice were warning about. Jim, thanks very much.
All right, so takeaways from this. That is all of the weapon shipments we've given Ukraine have been useful. But that is a very heartening thing to hear. That most recent, upgrade we're giving them. These are essentially the equivalent of hand-me-down clothes. Don't think we're giving them our mechas or whatever the most modern stuff we have is. They're really not. This is the stuff that was in our garage collecting dust. But we are America, and while I will rag on us for all kinds of things, and while I wish we would have spent that money over the decades on the kind of infrastructure that would have made us a utopia by now, it can't be denied. Sitting in the garage are some pretty mother effing lethal tools. To send what are essentially a bunch of tow missiles bolted onto a vehicle that can hit, 60 miles an hour, I think? That's going to have an effect. That is going to severely impede Russia. Also, bear in mind, if you're following the war and you care about folks in a country that doesn't have the same name as yours, the Ukrainians have been fighting on the roads a lot. They've been fighting on foot a hell of a lot. And the ability to capitalize on their mobility and on their guerrilla tactics that they've developed. A lot of the people, by the way, who are fighting this war right now, 11 months ago were school teachers, baristas. Not ashamed to tell you that as a grown man, I actually wept watching the news when they interviewed an actual coffee shop worker who hung up their apron and put on a vest to go fight. That's who's fighting. But they've gotten damn good at it. There's no training like the field, I guess, because they're very effective. And the addition of the Bradleys in particular, and perhaps I missed that before. I need to look into specifically what they're sending. But if they are sending upgraded surface-to-air missiles, oh, baby. You love to see that. So, very positive news on the Ukrainian front. If you have questions about Ukraine and how you can help, I do intend to dedicate a goodly amount of the next stream to that. In the VOD upload of this, I'm going to include links for some relief organizations. I'm ashamed to say I forgot about it for the live stream, but there will be links if you're watching this at a time that is not Tuesday. There will be links in the description for ways you can help Ukraine. But if you are watching this live, if you Google Ukrainian aid, the Ukrainians did a heck of a job setting up organizations good and early that allow us to help. Bear in mind, it's not just bullets that they need. As they said, they've got a lot. They are when I say they, I don't just mean those who are carrying guns. I mean everybody living in Ukraine is getting shelled. Anybody living on the front certainly is getting shelled. And the country is suffering some pretty severe power cuts right now, brownouts and blackouts, as it is cold out. So there are organizations that are helping to combat that. Consider helping them. It'll make you feel better going to sleep tonight in your warm bed. If you know that you've helped a little girl somewhere go to sleep in a bed that is warm herself. So consider that. And as a very awkward segue, looking at a few of the more global issues that you can do something about. Looking at the most practical ways you can make a dent into the world's current #1 problem, which is climate change, global warming. The fun fact is you can do this and save yourself money in the process. It's not an accident either, because if you're a close follower of climate change, you will know corporations are essentially the problem. We could be doing things in a much greener way, but we have big oil lobbyists. We have the very same lobbyists who convince our politicians to make plastic a regular part of our lives. You go shopping, how many bags of plastic do you just shove in the trash? Do you have a big handful of plastic? Yeah, that's because an oil lobbyist made damn sure that they push a lot of petroleum. Plastic's made with oil. Our streets are designed the way they are because of car manufacturers. Our public transit system is nearly non-existent in big swaths of the country because of car manufacturers. It goes on and on and on. But the end result is to get money out of you. If they can do it while making you happy, I guess they'll do that. If they can get even 1 cent more and ruin your life and every life in your family and end your lineage for all time, I promise you they will take that option instead. So, fortunately, due to the evolution of technology, there is a way you can take money out of big oil's pocket, put it in your own, and at the same time, massively reduce your carbon footprint. And let's be clear about this. It's not really your carbon footprint. It's the carbon footprint of the company that's been extorting you to heat your home and turn on your lights. Solar panels. It's not an option for everybody because they are, for many, prohibitively expensive. But if you're the kind of person that does own a home already, you're likely the kind of person that can afford solar panels, particularly given the tax cuts, somewhere in the 20% range currently, that you get for installing these panels. It's one of those things where money makes money. If you're middle class or even lower middle class, and you can afford to put solar panels on your home, the good news is you will save money over time. Let's look at, I'll give you first what I was going to show you, the abridged version. And then we got a video from a guy called Suit TV, because he did exhaustive work. Look at this here.
Hey everyone. It's been about 2 years now since I made my last video on Is Solar Worth It?
Well, There we go. We had a little extra. So here's a paper from a student in Berkeley. Residential solar panel system has the capability of providing for the electricity needs of an entire home with about 80% lower carbon emission than fossil fuels. 80% lower carbon emission than fossil fuels. Don't be mistaken, you're not going to be powering your home the entire time by the solar panels. But when the sun's out, by default, when they come on and automatically take over the power needs, you'll be saving money. And you'll also be saving the environment. In Britain, the other study I looked at, in Britain, they measured this out to be about 1 ton, with an E, so 1,000 kilograms, of carbon per year, per household. That's huge. If you get a neighborhood doing this, that is going to have an effect on the environment. But also, because you have your own concerns to worry about, you will save money. There is a ton of money being invested right now into denying that fact, but it is true. You will save money. And here is my... Here is the fella who did the work to measure it. This guy installed, I watched 2 videos of his. I've included the one he uploaded 5 months ago. He installed solar panels in his home, and he took exhaustive notes. This is my kind of guy. He's got a woefully low amount of subscribers, so if you like tedious, nerdy stuff, he's the man for you. He measured it extensively, and the results, I think, speak for themselves. We're going to jump around in this video because I can't do commentary over the whole thing. But let's look at the intro and the end.
Hey everyone, it's been about 2 years now since I made my last video on Is Solar Worth It? So after 4 years, I wanted to give you an update and see how it's been going. So just a quick recap, in my last video, I concluded that these solar panels right here would be saving me $26,000 over the course of 25 years. So I want to go back, look at the math, see how we're progressing, and if we're actually on track to do that, as well as answer some of the big questions and common questions that I got on my last video. So let's dive into it. All right, so now let's look at the numbers and how I've fared over the past 4 years. We're going to start with 2018, early June was when I got my system turned on. So we're going to do the last 7 months from 2018, and we're going to do the first 5 months of 2022. And altogether, that's 4 years total, right? So let's look at the kilowatt hours produced in those 4 years has been 49,000, or around 12,300 per year. Now, they had said to me that I would be producing about 12,300 per year, so we're literally right on track. Now, they did tell me that, and I got a lot of comments on this, that the system would degrade over time. So basically, this was the...
Hold up a second. I just got to say, this is the kind of thing I love to see. I love to see a man showing his work, you know? Don't just tell me X, Y, or Z, but give me the numbers. To break that down another way, if you are able to get these installed, this guy is saying $26,000 over 25 years. You're giving yourself, aside from helping the environment, which is a great reason in and of itself to do it, but you're giving yourself a $1,000 bonus a year. That's what it works out to. Let's go into the numbers. If you want to see the numbers, he actually included the spreadsheets in his description. I'm telling you, this guy's after my own heart. But let me jump down to his conclusion here. Yes. Yada, yada, batteries, yada, yada. Okay, this is what I thought was interesting.
So, you know, they say it would be at 85% capacity. I'm going to take it conservative and go to 75% capacity. And we're still going to be producing, you know, a good amount.
I went a little too far here. Going to go back ever so slightly. So he's talking about degradation over time. Solar panels, like most machines that get constant use, wear over time. Well, most machines in general wear over time. And so their efficiency and therefore their output is less and less and less. But he did the math on it, and it would appear that they, well into their life, do save him money.
Say I held the house for 25 years and had the solar panels on and kept them on. After year 25, the warranty's up, but you're still getting production out of them. So, they say it would be at 85% capacity. I'm going to take it conservative and go to 75% capacity, and we're still going to be producing, a good amount, around 9,200 per year, right? I doubled my electric bill from what it is now, just thinking about the rising costs, and I would be producing less as well. So, but even so, right, my electric bill would have been $24,000. So, I mean, if you're saving an average of $1,700 a year, even after 25 years, in 10 years from year 26 to 36, you're saving $17,000. Why wouldn't that be more attractive for a potential home buyer?
So he goes into more and more numbers. He continues to break it down, essentially progressing throughout the video, making the case for himself more and more difficult to make, but it still works out to be profitable in the end. So as purely a financial investment, it's a good idea. But that's also what you can do if you have the means to solve or to help be part of the solution to one of the major issues affecting the world right now. Saw a comment from a viewer regarding American investment in arms. It's one thing to pass on weapons. It's another to use them correctly. Fair point. I would argue that America has not used its weapons correctly as often as it has used them incorrectly. But still, it's a fair point. Regarding the solar panels, first of all, that, again, is Suit TV. Very good channel, link in the description. I'll be poking in from time to time, see what else he does. Thing number 2, be on the lookout for legislation, which is now beginning, because remember, we have oil lobbyists trying their damnedest to make sure this doesn't get popularized. Look out for legislation that makes solar panels less profitable, for you. Don't let it happen. Your main way of preventing that is vote as left as you can, but also to write your representative. Just tell them you're watching, and you will see their behavior change massively. So, again, this has been a rare second stream in a day for what you can do. Once again, my name is Jake, and I gotta say, it was kind of fun. I kind of dug it. I'll tell you this, though. Brand new channel. And it tickles me every day that people watch. I love it. And I'm trying to build it into a business. If you found this content valuable in any way, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe if you'd like to see some more of your old pal Jake. This is WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. I'll see you tomorrow.
You can tell that I make it look easy. It's a cheat code. It's a free throw. If it's so illegal, you can tell that I make it look easy. It's a cheat code. It's a free throw. If it's so illegal, yeah.
The game is strategic, I'm bobbing and weaving. Don't argue with demons, okay? Ain't nothing between us, vacation on Venus. I'm meaning I'm somewhere you ain't, okay? I feel like I'm Jordan when I turn the mic on a dangerous cycle. I make you a rival, I pray for the title. We making the finals, I pray we don't spiral, I pray we don't. I wrote out the vision, been focused and winning. Don't try to guess me, you know that we driven. Nothing get past me, you know we ain't slipping. The team is on 10 men, I promise we different. Scotty and Dennis, we killing opponents. This ain't what you wanted, no way. Yeah, I know it ain't fair, we just taking it there. Hope it's coming through clear.
You can tell that I make it look easy. It's a cheat code. It's a free throw. If it's so illegal, you can tell that I make it look easy. It's a cheat code. It's a free throw. If it's so illegal, yeah.